One whisper in the dark changed everything, her secret, my promise, and a bond we could never explain. I never expected something so ordinary to feel like the beginning of something unforgettable. It was just another evening at my friend's house, a place I'd been to countless times before. The living room carried that familiar warmth, a faint hum of the television in the background, the smell of coffee lingering from the afternoon, and the muffled laughter of my friend coming from upstairs as he searched for his game controller. It should have been nothing more than routine. But then she walked into the room. My friend's mom wasn't a stranger to me. I'd seen her countless times over the years, always polite, always kind. But that night, something shifted in how I noticed her. Maybe it was the way the soft glow of the lamp brushed against her features, outlining the quiet confidence she carried. Or maybe it was just me, seeing her not only as someone's mom, but as a woman whose presence seemed to silence everything else around her. She wore a simple blouse, light-colored, the sleeves slightly rolled to her elbows. Her hair, loose and a little undone, fell gently against her shoulders. There was nothing dramatic about it, but it made her look effortlessly graceful. And when she smiled at me, just a small, passing smile, it felt like my chest tightened in a way I couldn't explain. She asked if I wanted water, her tone casual, almost motherly, but when she handed me the glass, her fingers brushed against mine. It was the lightest touch, maybe even accidental, but it stayed with me longer than it should have. The cool glass in my hand didn't distract me from the warmth that lingered on my skin. As she sat across the room, I found myself stealing glances I shouldn't have. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The way her eyes softened when she looked my way, as though she knew I was watching but didn't mind. Every small gesture carried weight, though neither of us said a word about it. I told myself I was overthinking, that it was nothing. Just politeness. Just imagination. But deep down, I knew better. Something was stirring in the silence between us. And as the minutes passed, I realized the night wouldn't remain ordinary for long. The night carried on with the same easy rhythm. My friend eventually gave up searching for his missing controller and disappeared upstairs, calling out that he'd be back in a minute. His footsteps faded, and soon it was just the two of us downstairs. I hadn't thought much of it at first, until the silence between us grew heavy. It wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it had a pull, a weight that made me suddenly aware of every detail, the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the faint ticking of the clock above the dining table, the dim golden glow of the overhead light. She walked into the kitchen, barefoot, moving with a calm grace that made the simplest motion look deliberate. I followed, telling myself I was just being polite, that I should thank her again for the water. But when she turned, she was already closer than I expected. Her eyes caught mine, steady, searching. And then she leaned in. It wasn't dramatic, not rushed. It was as if the moment itself slowed down. Her hand brushed against my arm, just enough to hold me still. I could feel the warmth of her breath near my ear as she whispered, soft but urgent, "Promise me this stays secret." The words sank into me like they were heavier than air. A request, a plea, and a warning all in one. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with the sense that I'd just been trusted with something fragile, something that could break if I didn't protect it. I swallowed hard, searching her expression. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't playing a game. There was something serious in her eyes, something vulnerable. I wanted to ask why, to demand what it was she needed me to hide. But the way she looked at me silenced every question. It was as if the answer didn't matter as much as the promise itself. My voice was low, almost caught in my throat, but I said it anyway, "You have my word." Her hand lingered for a moment on my sleeve, as though she needed to feel the truth in my response. And then she stepped back, her eyes softening, though the weight of her request still hung thick in the air. I stood there, pulse unsteady, realizing that whatever this was, whatever she had just drawn me into, I could never look at her, or myself, the same way again. That night, when I finally lay down in my own bed, sleep refused to come. My room was quiet, the world outside calm, but inside my chest everything felt unsettled. Her words, "Promise me this stays secret," echoed like a whisper I couldn't turn off. I kept replaying the scene in my head. The closeness of her breath, the brush of her hand, the way her eyes had searched mine as though my answer carried more weight than I could possibly understand. I had promised without hesitation, yet now, in the stillness of the night, doubt gnawed at me. Why me? Why trust me with something she wouldn't even tell her own son? I turned onto my side, staring at the faint shadows stretching across the ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face again, soft yet steady, lined with an expression that wasn't just playful curiosity. There had been vulnerability there, maybe even loneliness. And that thought alone made my chest ache in a way I didn't want to admit. But guilt sat heavy, too. My friend, my closest friend, slept in the room upstairs that night, completely unaware of the silent exchange that had just passed between his mother and me. If he ever found out. I didn't even want to imagine. Yet beneath all that guilt was something far more dangerous. A secret thrill. The knowledge that she had chosen me, and only me, to share that hidden moment with. That our eyes had locked, our voices hushed, as though the entire world had shrunk to just the two of us. It was intoxicating, and terrifying. I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to block it all out, but the memory kept returning, how close she'd been, how my pulse had raced like I'd been standing on the edge of something forbidden. I told myself I shouldn't think about her like this. That I should bury it, let it fade. But the more I tried, the stronger it clung. A secret wasn't just something you held, it became part of you. And now, with every passing hour, I realized that promise had changed me. It wasn't just her secret anymore. It was ours. And I wasn't sure if I felt trapped by it, or alive because of it. The days that followed felt strangely altered, as if the air inside that house carried a weight only she and I could sense. My friend moved around us with his usual energy, laughing, making plans, never noticing the quiet current that had begun to hum between his mother and me. It started small. A hand resting briefly on my shoulder when she leaned past me in the kitchen. At first, I told myself it was nothing, just her natural warmth. But then I noticed how her hand lingered a second too long, how her thumb almost brushed against my shirt as if unwilling to let go. There were her glances, too. Across the table during dinner, when she asked if I wanted more bread, her eyes held mine a heartbeat longer than necessary. I felt the pulse in my throat quicken every time. She would smile faintly, almost secretively, before looking down at her plate again, as if she hadn't just set my chest on fire with a simple look. One afternoon, I was leaning against the counter, watching my friend dig through cupboards for snacks. She passed behind me, close enough that her arm brushed the small of my back. The touch was light, barely there, but it froze me where I stood. My skin tingled even after she'd moved away, her presence still clinging to me like warmth from a fading flame. I wondered constantly if she was aware of the effect she had on me, or if these gestures were instinctive, natural. Yet, when I caught her eyes later, the faintest curve of her lips told me she knew exactly what she was doing. And the most dangerous part? I didn't want her to stop. Every interaction became a careful dance. Her laughter in the background, the way her perfume lingered in the hallway, the soft sound of her footsteps on the wooden floor, it all pulled me closer, without either of us saying a word. But with every touch, every glance, the guilt grew heavier too. I found myself avoiding my friend's eyes, terrified he might sense something. And yet, in the same breath, I craved the next moment alone with her. It was intoxicating and impossible all at once. I told myself it was just harmless, just a connection we couldn't explain. But deep down, I knew, small touches and lingering looks could burn hotter than any fire. And this fire was only growing stronger. It was late one evening when the moment I'd been both waiting for and dreading finally came. The rain had just ended, and the world outside smelled of wet earth and quiet renewal. I stepped out onto the porch to catch some air, the cool night breeze brushing against my skin. The street was calm, lit only by the occasional flicker of a passing car's headlights. A few minutes later, the door opened behind me. She stepped out, her presence softer than usual, her arms wrapped lightly around herself as though she needed the night air too. For a moment we just stood there, side by side, listening to the dripping sound of water sliding off the roof. "I don't usually do this," she said at last, her voice low, almost swallowed by the quiet. "I don't usually talk about myself." I turned to her, surprised. She kept her gaze forward, as if afraid to meet my eyes. "All day long, people see me as one thing," she continued. "A mother. A caretaker. Someone dependable. And I am. But, sometimes I wonder if anyone sees me anymore." Her words struck me harder than I expected. There was no dramatic confession, no declaration, just a quiet truth she had carried for too long. I felt the weight of it, the loneliness tucked inside her voice. Without thinking, I shifted closer. My hand found hers, resting gently atop her fingers. She didn't pull away. In fact, she let out the faintest breath, as though the simple contact gave her something she hadn't realized she needed. "You're seen," I whispered, the words coming from somewhere deeper than I knew I had. "Maybe more than you realize." That made her finally turn her head toward me. Her eyes, shimmering in the faint porch light, held a mix of relief and sadness. For a long moment, we said nothing, but the silence wasn't empty, it was full. Full of the truths we couldn't speak and the feelings neither of us dared to name. Her hand trembled slightly beneath mine, so I brushed my thumb gently over her knuckles, a small reassurance that I was listening, that I understood. And in that stillness, something shifted again, an invisible thread tightening between us. The rain had stopped, but I could feel the storm inside both of us. And for the first time, I knew this was no longer just her secret. It was ours. The house had fallen into silence that night. My friend had gone to bed hours ago, his door closed upstairs, the soft creak of his floorboards finally stilled. Downstairs, the lights were dim, only a faint glow spilling in from the street lamp outside the living room window. She was there, standing near the curtains, the moonlight painting her in soft silver. Her hair shimmered faintly in the pale light, her features outlined in a way that made her look both fragile and impossibly strong. I stopped at the edge of the room, my breath caught in my throat. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her eyes lifted and found mine across the dim space, and in that instant, the world felt unnervingly still. I walked closer, though every step felt like a decision I wasn't sure I had the right to make. The floor creaked beneath me, and yet she didn't move away. If anything, her gaze grew steadier, pulling me nearer with something unspoken, something neither of us had dared to name. When I finally stood before her, just an arm's length away, she raised her hand, slowly, almost as if testing whether I'd step back. I didn't. Her fingers came to rest lightly against my chest, right over the place where my heart beat far too quickly. The touch was featherlight, but it was everything. I could feel the warmth of her palm through the thin fabric of my shirt, the quiet tremor in her hand, the way her breath hitched when she realized I wasn't moving away. For a moment, time itself seemed to hold still. Her eyes searched mine, not with playfulness, but with something raw, something that felt dangerously close to longing. My lips parted, though no words came. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out the silence of the house. I wanted to close the distance. Every part of me ached to. But her hand against my chest wasn't a barrier, it was a reminder. A quiet plea to stop here, to let this be enough. So I didn't move closer. I stayed still, every nerve alive, every second stretched impossibly thin. And in that silence, in that unspoken tension, I understood, sometimes the most powerful moments aren't in what we do, but in what we resist. Her hand lingered, trembling slightly, then slowly slipped away. Yet the warmth she left behind burned into me as if it had marked me forever. The silence between us felt endless, yet I knew it couldn't last forever. Eventually, She drew in a slow breath and stepped back, her hand slipping away from my chest, leaving a lingering ache where her warmth had been. Her eyes shimmered in the faint glow of the moonlight, and for the first time that night, I noticed the trace of unshed tears there. She wasn't just strong and graceful, she was human, carrying a weight no one else seemed to see. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling as though the words themselves were fragile. "For keeping my trust. For not asking more than I can give." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. All the words I wanted to say, how much she mattered, how much that single promise bound me to her, burned in my chest. But instead, I said the only thing that felt true, the only thing that seemed enough. "Till my last breath." The room seemed to pause at that, like even the air itself was listening. Her expression softened, breaking into something that was neither a smile nor a frown, something in between, laced with gratitude, longing, and quiet acceptance. She reached up then, cupping my cheek with a tenderness that undid me completely. Her thumb brushed lightly against my skin, and before I could even breathe, she leaned in and pressed the softest kiss to my cheek. It wasn't a kiss that crossed boundaries. It wasn't reckless or wild. It was gentle, deliberate, a mark of trust, of something shared that would live in silence between us. And yet, that single touch carried more weight than anything I had ever known. When she pulled away, her hand lingered for a moment on my face before falling back to her side. She turned, moving toward the hallway, her steps quiet but certain. Just before she disappeared into the shadows, she looked back once, her eyes locking with mine for the last time that night. There were no more words exchanged. None were needed. As the silence filled the room again, I sank into the weight of what had just happened. I knew nothing in my life would ever feel quite the same. I hadn't just kept a secret, I had become part of it. And though no one else would ever understand, the memory of her touch, her trust, and that whispered plea would remain carved into me. Some promises are small. Some fade with time. But this one I would carry until my last breath.